I sat in my small cluttered apartment, planning my next photography expedition. I was a freelance photographer with a penchant for capturing the hidden beauties of the world. My life was a mosaic of journeys, each snapshot telling a story of distant lands and forgotten places. Yet, despite my adventurous spirit, I had always been cursed with a terrible sense of direction. Without my GPS, I was as lost as a ship without a compass in the vast ocean. It was on a crisp Wednesday morning when I received an unexpected package. Wrapped in plain brown paper, it bore no return address, only my name scribbled in hasty handwriting. Inside, nestled amongst a nest of bubble wrap, was a sleek, state-of-the-art GPS system. It was unlike any I had seen before. Its screen shimmered with a clarity that was almost hypnotic, and it felt unusually heavy in my hands. A small note was tucked beneath it, with just 2 cryptic words. Explore freely. Initially, I was thrilled. The device was a marvel, responding to my commands with an almost intuitive ease. For the first few days, it guided me flawlessly through the city's labyrinthine streets, its voice a soothing presence in the solitude of my car. I grew to trust it implicitly, a trust that I would soon come to regret. The day I planned to leave for the countryside, the sun was a brilliant orb in the clear blue sky, a perfect day for photography. My destination was a renowned scenic spot known for its lush greenery and vibrant wildlife. I keyed in the coordinates, anticipating a day of tranquil nature and photographic bliss. But the GPS had other plans. As I followed its directions, the familiar cityscape gradually gave way to more rural surroundings. I didn't notice anything amiss at first, entranced by the scenic beauty. It wasn't until the paved roads turned to gravel, and the gravel to dirt, that a sliver of doubt wormed its way into my mind. When the voice of the GPS, once so clear and reassuring, directed me down a narrow, overgrown path, I knew something was terribly wrong. The path led me to a place that seemed untouched by time, an abandoned village, its buildings decrepit, their once vibrant colors faded and peeling. A heavy silence hung over the place, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, thick and unyielding. I stopped the car, my heart racing with a mix of fear and confusion. This couldn't be right. I tried to re-enter my intended destination, but the GPS was adamant, rerouting me back to this eerie ghost town every time. I should have turned back then, should have ignored the gnawing curiosity that whispered in my ear. But there was something about the village, something that beckoned me with an almost magnetic pull. With a mixture of trepidation and intrigue, I stepped out of my car and into the unknown, not realizing that I was walking into a nightmare that had been waiting for me all along. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, as I ventured into the heart of the abandoned village. Each step felt like a trespass into a realm forgotten by time. The houses, lined up like silent sentinels, bore the scars of neglect. Windows were boarded up, and doors hung loosely on their hinges. Nature had begun to reclaim the place, with vines creeping up the walls and wildflowers sprouting through the cracks in the pavement. Despite the sunlight, a chilling shadow seemed to loom over the village, as if the light itself was hesitant to fully penetrate this forsaken place. I lifted my camera, trying to capture the eerie beauty of the decay, but the images seemed to blur inexplicably on the screen, as though the village was resisting being photographed. As I wandered deeper, I noticed strange symbols etched into some of the doorframes and walls. They were unlike any I had seen before, a series of angular lines and circles, forming patterns that made my head throb if I looked at them too long. There was an unsettling feeling that these symbols held meanings I couldn't comprehend, secrets that were not meant for me. The GPS, which I had almost forgotten in my pocket, suddenly sprang to life. It began speaking in a language I couldn't recognize, the words distorted and guttural, sending a shiver down my spine. The screen flickered with static, briefly displaying coordinates before reverting to the cryptic language. Compelled by an inexplicable urge, I followed the coordinates, leading me deeper into the village. I passed what looked like a town square, with a dried-up fountain at its center. Surrounding it were remnants of what might have once been a marketplace. Tattered awnings flapped in the gentle breeze, and stalls lay overturned, their contents long since pilfered or rotted away. It was a ghostly tableau of daily life, frozen in time. The further I walked, the more the village seemed to stir around me. Shadows shifted in the corners of my eyes, and I heard faint whispers echoing between the buildings. The air grew colder, a chill that seeped into my bones. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but part of me knew these were not natural phenomena. My journey ended at the doorstep of a particularly decrepit house. Its windows were so caked with grime that no light shone through, and the door was adorned with the same cryptic symbols I had seen earlier, only far more elaborate. The GPS voice, now clear again, urged me to enter in a tone that brooked no argument. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to escape this place and never look back. But something stronger, something darker, compelled me to push the door open and step inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world outside seemed to fall away, leaving me trapped in the heart of the village's secret, a secret that was waiting just for me. The door creaked ominously as I stepped into the house, the sound echoing through the silent interior like a warning. A musty smell assaulted my senses, the air thick with the dust of decades. Dim light filtered through the dirty windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. The house felt alive, as if it was breathing around me, its walls pulsating with a slow, steady rhythm. I moved cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the layer of dust that carpeted the floor. The house was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, each more dilapidated than the last. Peeling wallpaper adorned the walls, and broken furniture lay scattered, as if the inhabitants had left in a hurry, never to return. I felt like an intruder in a tomb, the weight of unseen eyes following my every move. As I ventured deeper, the GPS continued its eerie litany in that unknown language, its screen flickering intermittently. The house seemed to respond to its voice, the air growing colder, the shadows darker. I tried to turn it off, but it refused to obey, its screen glowing with an otherworldly light. I stumbled upon a room that was different from the others. It was small and cramped, with walls lined with shelves filled with old books and trinkets. In the center of the room was a large, antique desk, covered in papers and photographs. But it was the photographs that froze me in my tracks. They were pictures of me. Not just recent photos, but images spanning my entire life. There were pictures from my childhood, from high school, from my travels around the world. Some were taken from afar, others up close, capturing moments I had long forgotten. It was as if my entire life had been documented by an unseen observer. Panic clawed at my chest, my heart pounding in my ears. How was this possible? Who had been following me? The realization that I had been watched, stalked even, for years was a violation beyond comprehension. Then the GPS spoke again, its voice now clear and chillingly familiar. It spoke my name, beckoning me to look deeper. Drawn by a force I couldn't resist, I sifted through the papers on the desk. They were filled with handwritten notes in a language I couldn't understand, accompanied by sketches of the symbols I had seen in the village. The final piece of the puzzle was a tattered journal, its pages yellowed with age. The entries were written in a frantic, barely legible scrawl, detailing a ritual tied to the village. It spoke of a dark entity that demanded a tribute, a life to be bound to the village forever. The last entry was incomplete, ending abruptly in the middle of a sentence. I felt a chill run down my spine as I pieced together the truth. The GPS, the village, the photographs, they were all part of a sinister design to lure me here, to complete the ritual that had been abandoned years ago. I was meant to be the final piece, the last tribute to whatever malevolent force lurked within these walls. The house seemed to close in around me, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. I had to get out, had to escape this nightmare. But as I turned to leave, the room darkened, the shadows coalescing into a tangible presence. The entity from the journal was here, and it wasn't going to let me leave easily. The room darkened, the air thickening around me as the entity made its presence known. Shadows swirled like smoke, coalescing into a formless mass that pulsed with a malevolent energy. The temperature plummeted, my breath turning to mist in the icy air. The GPS lay forgotten on the desk, its screen a beacon of eerie light in the growing darkness. I could feel the entity's gaze upon me, a pressure that bore down on my soul. It was as if it was peering into the very core of my being, searching for something hidden deep within. Fear gripped me, a primal, overwhelming terror that threatened to paralyze me. But amidst the fear, a spark of defiance kindled within me. I was not going to be a pawn in this twisted game. With a shaky breath, I reached for the camera hanging around my neck. If this entity was bound to the village, perhaps capturing it on film would give me some leverage, some way to break its hold over me. I raised the camera, the lens focusing on the writhing mass. The entity reacted violently, the room shaking as if in the throes of an earthquake. Objects flew off the shelves, books and trinkets hurtling through the air like missiles. I ducked, covering my head with my arms, as the world around me descended into chaos. Amidst the cacophony, a voice echoed in my mind, a voice that was not my own. It was ancient, filled with malice and pain. It spoke of centuries of loneliness, of a hunger that could never be sated. It promised me eternal suffering if I did not submit, if I did not become part of the village forever. But I refused to give in. With a surge of adrenaline, I took the picture, the camera's flash slicing through the darkness like a blade. The entity recoiled as if struck, its form wavering, the shadows dissipating momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted from the room, the house groaning in protest as I fled. The corridors twisted and turned, disorienting me, as if the house itself was trying to trap me. I stumbled and fell, my hands scraping against the rough, dusty floor. Panic surged within me, a desperate clawing need to escape. But I pushed forward, driven by sheer survival instinct. Finally, I saw the front door ahead, its outline faintly visible in the dim light. I lunged towards it, my hand closing around the doorknob. With all my strength, I pulled it open, a blast of fresh air hitting my face. I stumbled out into the village, the entity's enraged screams echoing behind me. The house seemed to shudder, its windows flashing with an otherworldly light. Then, with a deafening roar, it collapsed, the walls imploding inwards, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the sky. Exhausted, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. The village was silent now, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. It was over. I had escaped the entity's grasp, but at what cost? The images of the photographs, the voice of the entity, they were etched into my mind, a haunting reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. As I looked up at the sky, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, I knew that my life would never be the same. The village, the entity, the ritual, they were all part of a nightmare that had become all too real. And as I made my way back to my car, the remnants of the house still smoldering in the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The drive back to the city was a blur, my mind still reeling from the nightmarish events at the village. The once comforting hum of the car's engine now sounded like a distant echo, muffled by the thick fog of my thoughts. The GPS, now silent and inert, sat like a discarded relic on the passenger seat, a reminder of the ordeal I had narrowly escaped. As the city's skyline came into view, bathed in the soft light of dawn, a sense of surrealism washed over me. The normalcy of the waking world seemed at odds with the horrors I had witnessed. People went about their morning routines, oblivious to the dark secrets that lay just beyond their perception. I parked my car in the familiar spot outside my apartment, the events at the village replaying in my mind. The photographs, the entity, the collapsing house, it all felt like a grotesque tapestry woven from the threads of my own life. I knew I couldn't just forget what had happened, couldn't pretend it was all a bad dream. But where did I even begin to seek answers? I trudged up the stairs to my apartment, each step heavy with exhaustion. Inside, I slumped onto the couch, the adrenaline that had sustained me now drained away. I was left with a bone-deep weariness and a gnawing sense of dread. The images from the village haunted me, flashes of memory that flickered at the edges of my consciousness. Sleep was elusive, my dreams plagued by shadowy figures and whispered threats. The entity's voice lingered in my mind, a constant menacing presence. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, the remnants of nightmares clinging to me like cobwebs. When morning came, I was a shell of myself, hollowed out by fear and confusion. I knew I couldn't face this alone, that I needed to share my story, if only to prove to myself that it was real. But who would believe such a tale? To the rational mind, it would sound like the ramblings of a madman. I turned to the one place where my story might be accepted, the online world of forums and chat rooms. There, tales of the strange and supernatural were commonplace, shared by those who had experienced the unexplainable. I typed out my story, every detail I could recall, and hit post, sending my experience into the digital ether. The responses were a mix of skepticism, fear, and fascination. Some users offered theories, others shared similar experiences. But one message stood out, a private message from a user who claimed to know about the village. They spoke of a curse, of a cycle that had to be completed, and warned that my escape was only temporary. My heart sank as I read the message. The idea that I was still bound to that place, that the entity's influence extended beyond the village, was a terror I couldn't face. But as much as I wanted to dismiss it as just another online myth, the events I had lived through were proof that some horrors were all too real. I was left with an unshakable feeling of being watched, a paranoia that clung to me like a second skin. The city around me felt different now, its familiar streets tinged with an unseen menace. I was trapped in a world where the lines between reality and nightmare had been irrevocably blurred. And as I tried to navigate this new reality, I couldn't shake the fear of what might come next. The entity had let me go once, but would it be so lenient a second time? The thought of being pulled back into that nightmare, of facing the horrors of the village again, was a prospect that filled me with dread. As I stared out of my apartment window, the city below a tapestry of light and shadow, I knew that the story was far from over. The village, the entity, the curse, they were all part of a larger, darker puzzle that I had unwittingly become a piece of. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the buildings, I couldn't help but wonder if the entity was out there, watching, waiting for its next move in the macabre game it had started. The days that followed were a descent into a world tinted with paranoia and fear. My once vibrant city life now felt like a hollow facade, each interaction tinged with the dread of the unseen and unknown. The ominous words of the mysterious online user echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the curse that might still bind me to that accursed village. In an attempt to find some semblance of normalcy, I tried to immerse myself in my work. Photography, once a source of joy and escape, now felt like a futile endeavor. The lens of my camera, which had once captured the beauty of the world, now seemed to only frame the shadows that lurked at the edge of my vision. The GPS, that cursed device, lay untouched in a drawer. I couldn't bring myself to dispose of it, yet I couldn't bear to look at it either. It was as if by keeping it close, I could somehow contain the malevolence it represented. Nights were the worst. Sleep was a rare visitor, and when it came, it brought with it dreams that were vivid and disturbing. I would find myself back in the village, the shadows whispering my name, the entity's presence suffocating me. I would wake up gasping for air, the line between dream and reality blurred. Then, one evening, as I sifted through my mail, my heart stopped. There, among the bills and junk mail, was a package. It was eerily similar to the one that had started it, all plain brown paper, my name scribbled on the front. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tore it open, a sense of inevitable dread washing over me. Inside was a GPS, identical to the one I had received before. Its screen flickered to life in my hands.